With DHCP, we also have DHCP version 6, which is going to go along with our IPv6 addressing scheme. And DHCP version 6 is very similar to what we use with IPv4. The IPv6 global unicast address can be configured manually or dynamically. And there are two methods in which IPv6 global unicast addresses can be assigned dynamically. There is the stateless address auto configuration, which is SLAAC, is shown in the figure to the right there, or we have dynamic host configuration protocol for IPv6, and it's stateful, so that's just the DHCP version 6. Now the SLAAC at its core is ICMP version 6. And what it does is it allows you to get a global unicast address without your DHCP server for version 6. Some of the advertisement messages that will be provided addressing and other configuration information would normally be provided by a DHCP server, or your router solicitation messages or the RS messages, and then you have your router advertisement messages as well. The RS messages is when a client is configured to obtain addressing information automatically using the SLAAC, and the client sends a router solicitation message to the router. The router advertisement message is sent by a router to provide addressing information to clients that are configured to obtain their IPv6 address automatically. So that basically the SLAAC is a stateless type protocol, and then your DHCP version 6 is stateful. So you have stateless and stateful protocols. One of the things that you need to keep in mind when you're using the SLAAC is that a router must be configured or enabled as an IPv6 router before it can send the router advertisement messages. And to enable the IPv6 routing, a router is configured by doing the IPv6 unicast routing command in config-t. Now the decision as to whether or not you're going to use the SLAAC or the DHCP version 6 is going to depend on how you have things configured. And you can use either SLAAC, DHCP, or you can use them in a combination, and it really depends on how you have your RA messages set up. There's two flags that it's going to look for. It's going to look for the managed address configuration flag, that's signified by the M flag, and the other configuration flag, or the O flag. So you can have either SLAAC, which is router advertisement only. You can have stateless DHCP version 6, which is the router advertisement and DHCP version 6, or you can have stateful DHCP version 6, which is DHCP version 6 only. But regardless of what option you use, it's recommended by the RFC 4861 that all IPv6 devices perform the duplicate address detection on any unicast address, including addresses configured with the SLAAC or the DHCP version 6. Now, by default, your Cisco router is going to be set up with SLAAC protocol as its routing options. You could go in and change the M flag and the O flag, and the way you're going to do that, if it's already been set up for a different type of protocol and you need to set it back to where it's using the SLAAC, is in the config interface mode. You're going to do no IPv6 ND managed config flag, and then you'll also issue the command for the no other config flag, and that's how you're going to set it back to the default. Now with DHCP version 6, remember we can have it either stateless or stateful, and in order to have it stateless we have to change the O flag to 1, and the command that you would issue to do this is IPv6 ND other config flag, and that way it turns the flag from 0 to 1. Now if we were going to do the DHCP version 6 stateful, we would need to change the management flag to 1, and we'll leave the other flag to 0. So this time we would issue the IPv6 ND manage config flag, and that switches it from 0 to 1. Now, if we're going to turn our DHCP version 6 on, and we're going to create a DHCP version 6 server, there are 4 steps that we need to take care of. One, we need to enable our IPv6 routing, and at config T we're going to do IPv6 Unicast routing. Next, you need to configure a DHCP version 6 pool, and at that point you're going to type in IPv6 DHCP pool, and then you're going to give your pool a name. I would suggest that you use uppercase letters. It's going to be easier when you do a show run to find the pool name when it's in all upper caps, because the majority of your coding is lowercase or Camelback 1. So using uppercase is going to make it just a little bit easier to stand out. So once we've created and configured the pool, we are now in the config pool, or the config DHCP version 6. Here we're going to put our pool parameters. You're going to have your DNS-server, and you're going to give your server's IP address. Then you're going to give domain/name, and then your domain name. Finally, you're going to exit out of that, so type exit. Then you're going to configure the DHCP version 6 interface that is going to use that pool. So you'll go into interface and then the interface number, whichever one you're putting it on. And then you're going to say IPv6 DHCP server, give the pool name that you created. And then if we're doing stateless, it's going to be IPv6 ND other config flag. Now, if we're going to do stateful DHCP router, we're going to create a server out of it. Our steps are very similar to what we did when we created the stateless. So what we're going to do here is we are going to enable the IPv6 routing. You will configure your DHCP pool. You will configure your pool parameters, and this time you're going to use an address prefix and a lifetime, which is how long this lease is going to be available basically. And then you're going to configure your DHCP interface. This time you'll do the IPv6 ND manage config flag, because we're wanting to switch the manage config flag from 0 to 1. Now, you can have your DHCP version 6 client on a different network than your DHCP version 6 server. If this is the case, then you need to have a relay set up for the DHCP version 6, and you're going to do this on the interface that is facing the DHCP version 6 client, and we're going to use the address of the DHCP version 6 server as your destination. So you would do the show IPv6 DHCP interface to see if you have things set up correctly. But to put it on there, you're going to do the interface, and then you'll say IPv6 DHCP relay destination with the destination IP address, and then you can end out of that and do the show to make sure that it took. Now there's 5 different things that you can look at if you're having trouble with your DHCP version 6. 5 tasks to look at when you're troubleshooting. First, resolve the address conflicts. See if there's any there. If there are, correct them. Verify allocation method. Test with a static IPv6 address. Make sure that there's an IPv6 address within your allotted IPv6s that you're using to make sure that things actually work. Verify your switch port configuration, and then test from the same subnet or Vlan to see if things are working.